Hello everybody and welcome to this new Daydream development debacle day. So for part 2 of this, my idea is to implement some gameplay elements. So we've got the player can move around, and we've got nothing else. We've got the player and it moves around using the Daydream controller. We're all very happy about that. But I would like to make this a platformer as was in the introduction, so let's do that. First things first, I want to have a death zone and just some pillars that the player can jump in between, right? So let's start with the pillars. 3D object, cube, that is literally just gonna be a pillar. It's gonna be nothing else about it. Let's just make it a bit bigger, a bit higher. There you go. Look at that, look at how beautiful this is. Marvelous, gorgeous. And I want to add something to the player, because the player, I want to see the extents of the player. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go and add a mesh render to it. Mesh filter and mesh render. Mesh filter is gonna be that one of a capsule. Although it's not quite ideal. Maybe the main camera should have the caps too. No, I don't like that actually. Let's remove it. Remove component and remove component. I'm just gonna add instead a capsule to it and just move this capsule a bit lower so that, yeah, we roughly see where the player is. We don't need to be super specific about it, but we know it's at 0.6. Oh, 0.5, right? Minus 0.5. That's where the capsule is. Yes. Of course, this capsule will not have any collisions on it. And I want to make another script here. That's just going to be disable on start. What's this going to do is just a simple script that is going to disable every game object is attached to it. Not necessarily on start, but on awake. Now we're gonna have to do this again, so add existing item, assets, game, code, disable on start. Again, I have no idea why it keeps on doing that, nor do I care particularly. So make this awake, and then have this this dot game object dot set active false. And we are all ready to go. Another thing I want to do, of course, is make this player. Oh, this is saved. Oh, it's compiling. Never mind, my bad. Is it done compiling? Please. Yes. Okay. So this is gonna be the player visual reference. Boom. Okay, let's make the player a prefab. Right, have our game folder, but we don't have a prefab folder. So prefabs. Making a player a prefab is gonna be making it very easy for us to just get this stuff sorted. This is also stuff that I want to have in the prefabs. Let's say create a folder with starting elements, fundamental elements, actually essential. Look at that, that is nomenclature to remember. The event system, of course, the headset, the main controller, the editor, emulator, and instant preview. Demo scene manager, I think that is not required at all actually, so I can safely remove it. I want to say, let's add the cube to the geometry. Now let's put the player on top of this cube, right? So that, boom, the player is now on top of the cube. How beautiful this is. I'm using F, of course, to focus on elements, so you can click on and press F on the keyboard. You should already know that, but if you don't, there you go, you know it now. Let's add a couple of pillars. Ctrl T to duplicate, and I'm holding Ctrl to just have the snapping of the pillars. We can change into isometric view for a better understanding of this. I hold control again. That's it. So let's actually get all these elements and move them here, because I'm gonna make a small course, let's say. I don't know, is this gonna be enough? Why not? Back into perspective mode. What I want to do is I want to make a death zone. Death zone, of course, is gonna be super nice because, you know, you kill things, namely the player. And this is going to introduce us to a very important part of Daydream development that I have introduced already earlier on, but I have not actually expanded upon. So last time I said that in Daydream there's a problem with resetting the scene, right? So what you would usually do in this particular situation is add an on trigger enter, right? And then just go if the other dot tag is equal to the player tag, of course. Then we go, you know, scene manager dot load scene. Need to add alt enter, of course, allows us to do quick changes, and that would go scene manager dot get active scene dot name, right? And this would reload the currently active scene. Now, if I do this, it will work, but it's not gonna work on mobile. Right, what's gonna happen is that the Daydream renderer will just stop operating. And I'll show you in a second what I mean by that. So let's make another cube. Oh, sorry. Let's make another cube. And let's call it Death. Now we add the Death Zone script to it. Of course, we don't need the renderer. Well, we're just gonna have the renderer there for the sake of understanding where this cube is, and then it's just gonna expand here. Let's make it way bigger there and way bigger here. Oh, I see. It just shifts on this side, but not up and down. That is interesting. I actually never knew that. So we just disable the mesh renderer, and then we have our death zone there. Of course, our box collider is gonna have to be a trigger. Now I'm gonna save this, and then I'm gonna launch this on Daydream. Now, let's see if it just works from the get-go, because the instant preview app might be a bit finicky since I'm starting again today. But no, launch there. Is it gonna give me the controller? Please. Yes, okay, look at that. Actually, you know what? I'll maximize this so I can see the controller. Right, let's try and jump, and boom, we can try and land on the next platform and so on and so forth. If I land here though, bam, there you go. It's saying here that it's lost connection to the editor, and of course you also see that the light map data has been reset, so everything looks like it's not illuminated. Now, this is a big issue. The camera, whenever it gets destroyed and rebuilt, loses track with the Daydream software development toolkit with the API, right? We have to go around this, and in order to go around this, there's something that's very simple that we can do, which is not resetting the game, not reloading the scene, but actually reset the player position. So this is something we can do immediately, actually reset the player position and the momentum. Sorry for the pause, because there's two things that we can do, right? I need to stop doing this because I usually do it when I'm developing on my own. I just stop and think and make this mental map of all the possibilities that could happen. But since this is an instructional video and you're supposed to be part of this mental map that gets built on the get-go, like on the go, yeah, I should actually stop doing that. But let's actually go through these possibilities, right? First one being, we don't reset the scene, we just move the player back. So we can track our initial position and store it in a private vector tree in the player. And of course momentum is going to be 0 and rotation is going to be quaternion.identity. And in that case, whenever we go and die as a player, we can just go back, roll back, and we just go like, oh no, by the way, no. You go from at the start. Okay, this is something we can do, no problem. The only main issue that I have with it is that the rest of the level doesn't get reset. So if we have triggers, if we have I don't know, like objects that are moving and we want them to be in the same position as if that they were when the scene started, that is gonna be an issue. Another thing that we can do, and this is something we've done, for example, on Disaster Rally, that's the Daydream game I'm working on, is that we actually make a persistent data object that regardless we're gonna have to make, okay, during this development time. We are actually going to be making a persistent data object. Is undeniable, are useful, having something that is just keeping track of things and it's always there in memory is. So we could make that a static class, but I instead prefer to have it instanced in the Unity editor as a game object with a persistent data class attached to it, so that, you know, I can still refer to it and I can access mono behavior stuff with it. So I would actually prefer to go for the latter, to make that persistent data object, because with that, then what happens is that before I load the scene, I can make a custom load scene method and call that instead of using the scene manager. And then what I can do is I can grab the player, reparent the player to the persistent data object that will not get destroyed on loading the scene, and then after the scene is loaded, I can just put the player back in. But back in where? Because this premise has to be made. The player cannot be in the scene already, so we need to make some kind of player position placeholder that will get destroyed as soon as the player gets instanced in the scene, and we should only instance the player in the scene if there isn't another player object already. So let's actually take care of some data management, which is my favorite thing. Although this is not quite data management in the sense of having lists and, you know, just passing data around. It's mostly about organizing our program flow, organizing how things are done. So let's start by creating a persistent data class. And I also want to make a new object, which is going to be our capsule. It's going to just be a capsule. Oh, of course I need to wait for it to compile, but there you go. That's a good capsule. Just gonna parent it with the player and 0 it. Right? Okay, so this is a bit of an issue, like the player is gonna be always on top of the capsule. Well, just below the capsule actually. Yeah. Well, that is a bit of an issue, but it's something we can take care of by just moving the player a bit, right? Actually, this is gonna be fun. Alright, we're just gonna call this position placeholder for the player, and it's just gonna be having its own tag, player starting pause. That's just for us to remember, right? What I want to do is I want to fetch this position, I want to raycast down, and whenever it encounters something, I want to put the player, the start of the player there, of course, right? And then offset it by 0.5, because the player is actually 0.5 units down. First thing first then, persistent data object. Let's get it into the project. Here we go. And let's make this actually persistent. The way we do this is by adding the don't destroy on load method call here on start, and we pass this .game object to it. So it means that when you reload the scene, do not destroy this object. This game object is just going to stay persistent. You probably already know these things, but there's no harm in repeating them, as some people might not know them, and you know, it's not too bad to actually do a bit of repetition of the basics. After that, what I want to do is I want to fetch the player. So here I'm gonna have our region for the variables. It's just because I like it. It's not required here because we don't have any variables, but it doesn't really matter. So public game object player prefab. This is gonna be what we're gonna be using. And then I also want to make a method here in it. Oh, yes, sorry, my bad. Has to be private void init. I just want to call this init. Come on, can I just not name my methods? And I just want to call it after this, just because I don't want to clutter start. It doesn't really matter, you can have it however you want. What I want to be doing here is I want to check if there is a player object already. So I'm gonna use the find object of type because I'm gonna be looking for the player class. And if I cannot find the player, then I want to spawn it, and I want to spawn it exactly where my position placeholder is. So vector 3 spawning position is gonna be equal to game object dot find with tag, and the tag of course is gonna be our player start pos, I think, dot transform dot position, and then we're gonna have spawning pos plus equal new vector, no actually vector 3 dot up multiplied by, I don't remember how much. Let's have a look. First of all, let's double check the tag. The tag of this is actually player starting pos. That's good. Now here, the player, what if I zero this player out, right? If I zero this player out, the player is there. So it's gonna have to go up 0.5, I believe. No, it's gonna be up by 1. That's good. That's good. Oh, wrong again. So we just go up by 1. What I want to do though, before I do that, right? Because my spawning position is not where I want to spawn my player. What I want to do is I would put my player on the ground. So before I do this, actually this is never gonna happen. Now that I think about it, I want to create a raycast, right? If physics dot raycast, starting from the spawning position, going dot up, going down, so minus vector 3 up, right? Out hit. What is hit? Hit is our raycast hit. Right? If there is a raycast, good, fine, we'll just put the player there. Else, of course, we wanna have our spawning position unchanged. If we do change it though, what I wanna do is I wanna get my spawning position has to be equal to hit.point. So wherever the raycast intersects geometry, that is where I want to spawn my player. But of course, I need to offset this. Plus vector 3 dot up. So plus 1, it's gonna go up. If not, our spawning position is just gonna be that, actually. And now, do I want to offset it? Because the player is the player is always gonna be a bit more down, so I want to offset it regardless. So else spawning position plus equal vector 3 dot up. So there we go. this is us spawning the player, right? Spawn player in, if not in scene. That is good, right? So on initialization, this is gonna spawn our player in, which means that now I can let the compiler do its work, but as soon as it's done, I can remove the player and I can insert our persistent data object. Now, the persistent data object should be spawned by an additional script somewhere, right? We should never put by hand our persistent data object in the scene, and usually what I do is I put it in the menu object. We don't have any menus because we only have one scene. So what I want to do is I want to make a persistent data object spawner, right? Data object spawner. We're not gonna go easy on the number of scripts that we make because it doesn't matter how many classes you create. It only matters if you're organized with them. Which are we? Who knows? We are for the now. Of course we're gonna add it again. Bum 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 bum. You know, naming this episode is actually gonna be quite difficult because there's nothing fancy that I'm doing here apart like management of the program flow, but it's not very catchy, right? You can't just go on Reddit and go like, hey, by the way guys, does anybody want to learn some program flow? It's like, that's not one part of games development that you actually want to learn, but it's one of the most important in my opinion. Although it doesn't really matter, right? We'll think about it later on. We'll burn that bridge when we come to it. We'll pillage that village when we dock to their port. So again, if I don't find the object, I have not added this. My bad. Data object spawner. There you go. If I don't find the object persistent data, well, I'm gonna instantiate a new game object. So game object go equals instantiate p data. There we go. And what was the problem with it? No, new game object p data, and then go add component persistent data. That's great. When persistent data is actually gonna have some public variables, so you know what? This is actually not the greatest of ideas because I don't want to set up this by code. I want to set it up by hand. So we're not going to be doing it that way. This is going to be our data prefab, right? And I want to actually instantiate that. So just instantiate data prefab. I don't really need to care where it goes as long as it's somewhere there. This is important because I want to be able to set up the persistent data object by hand using the Unity inspector, of course. So let's call this persistent data. Actually, you know what? Persistent data game object. I want it to have a little bit like more explanatory. The player prefab, of course, is gonna be in the prefabs, essentials, persistent data object. We just set it up using the player, and of course, in the prefabs, we drag our persistent data game object, and we can delete it from here. Now, let's have an empty object here, and we'll call it data spawner game object, and we add the data object spawner where the persistent data prefab is gonna be this one. Cool. Now I don't have a player in my room, but this is gonna spawn the persistent data game object. The persistent data game object is gonna spawn the player, and I'm gonna be able to just play exactly like I did just a second ago. But I'm gonna be spawned inside this capsule here. So what I want to do is actually I want to get rid of this, right? So in the persistent data, whenever I go and initialize the player, in any of these cases, I will spawn the player, which I didn't here though. So let's actually do that. And then I want to destroy the capsule, of course, the position placeholder. So at the end, I want to destroy this guy. And that's all well and good, but before then, spawn clean up scene. So here I instantiate my player prefab in spawning position, and at the moment on a quaternion.identity. Although later on I might want to be considering using something different, like the direction of the player position placeholder, which is definitely gonna be a better idea, but not now. Now it doesn't matter. So let's play, and we should actually be spawning in. Right, just a second. Let's not maximize and play. I want to see what's going on in the hierarchy. Bum 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 bum. Persistent data gets created, but doesn't actually spawn the player. Let's see. Player start pause is not defined. What have I called it? Player starting pause. My bad. That happens every time. You know, it's tags. Player starting pause. That should be okay, and I should be able to play the game now. It has not updated this. I changed it. Player start pause. What do you mean? I'm not doing that. Oh, yes, okay. Also, this happens all the time. If you feel like saying I'm not doing that, you're probably doing that. Double check. I know how annoying it can be, but... And we are rocking and rolling. That's the player. Has been spawned there, exactly on top. Not a half a unit more, not half a unit less. And we are now cooking. That's good, that's good. I don't know, we might have not recentered and recalibrated this, but I want to do it. Right? So I want to be... Yes, okay. This is good. But yeah, as soon as you go there, the whole thing kind of crashes, right? So what are we going to do for that? Well, first of all, we should bake our lighting. Remove this. Remove this. Just generate a light map on our own. Right, you can. That is great. So if you actually leave it on auto generate, is not actually do it. It's not gonna actually do it. You need to generate it by hand, and if you do, then you know it's gonna work. But this is a problem because we're still reloading the scene, but nothing is happening, nothing's going on, right? So let's make a couple of changes here. I'm not gonna be using scene management on the dead zone. I'm actually gonna be using it on the persistent data object, and I want to add a public void change to scene, and then I want to have a public void reset scene. Right? What reset scene is gonna do is gonna be just called this, and I want to have a string scene. What I want to do is I want to be passing this parameter to change the scene, of course. Change the scene using the same scene. Now, if you call reset scene, it's gonna just change to the same scene that we're in. And let's actually do it. So find object of type persistent data dot reset scene. Good stuff. Now this allows us to handle our own way of resetting the scene. Now, at the end of this, we're gonna be doing almost the same thing that we would do by just changing the scene, but this has to be turned into an asynchronous operation, right? We might add, later on we're gonna be adding like scene transitions, like, you know, fade in and fade out and stuff like that, but not now. At the moment, what I wanna do is I wanna be able to determine whether or not a scene has finished loading, right? So, and whenever a scene has finished loading, if the scene is the game scene that we're in, I want to reinitialize the position of the player, right? Whenever we're in a game scene and I'm loading a scene, I want to reinitialize the player. So the way I'm gonna be doing this is actually by using events. So Unity has something called Unity events that are very similar to C# events, right? That allows us to tie in C# delegates to generate methods that just get called when a certain event is triggered. It turns out that our scene manager has an event for when a scene is loaded, which is quite convenient because there's two ways, of course, of doing that. First is loading a scene asynchronously and then checking for when it is complete, the loading process is complete, and then doing what we want after the scene loading operations have been performed. And the other one is just hooking up to a delegate. Now, I'm gonna hook up to a delegate because it's faster, and if you've read the post I've put on Patreon, it says you ain't gonna need it. Like, that's the mantra. You ain't gonna need it. We're not gonna be needing all the fine-tuning, and if we do need it, we'll use it. But at the moment, Scene Manager will do the heavy lifting for us by calling the where is it? The event scene loaded. There you go. Plus equal on scene loaded. This is a method that we're going to be using ourselves, and let's actually generate that method using the power of Visual Studio. Hey, there you go. There you go. We're here. So let's actually make this a region. Scene management methods. I don't know why I capitalize every letter. I do not need that. I don't need to do that. And region. Boom. Curtain. Now arc0 is gonna be our scene. Scene mode is gonna be our mode. Right? The scene is the new scene that's gonna be loaded. Right? The scene that has been loaded in, which allows me to access the name of it. So if scene.name equals name scene. Okay, this is something that's actually very interesting because it requires a bit of building up of the program flow, again, of the game flow. How is the game gonna operate? So are we gonna be using a single game scene and then loading levels as prefabs, or are we gonna be using separate levels as scenes? This is a very interesting question to come up because, for example, in Disaster Rally we use a single game scene with prefabs. The advantage there being that we have no lighting. Like, every one of the lighting informations that we provide to the shaders is faked by the shaders themselves. We made some custom shaders for them that are highlighted in our various vlogs. But in here I would like to have some lights. I would like to have shadows, I would like to have everything nice, and I want to bake those shadows because of course I don't want to go I don't want to go and no, actually let me remove the audio because that is not gonna just a single message, that's gonna be continuing. I want to bake this information in. I don't want to have any real-time lighting or real-time reflections for that matter. Nothing real-time. This is a mobile game. You know, the less real-time calculations, the better. So, of course, it stands to reason that the best way to move, the best way to proceed would be to create scenes. But then this particular code has to be updated whenever we update a scene. Is there another way of doing this? Turns out there is. We can make a enum here that checks where we are in the game. Let's do it. Public enum game state. No. Game scene type. Game menu. There we go. That's our enum done, and we're also gonna have here a public game scene type. Scene type. It's gonna be equal to game. Of course, we start in the game. Whatever we wanna do, we make sure this is happening. So what I wanna have here as well is whenever I change to a scene, right? I wanna pass the game sim type as well. This is very important because I wanna change it. Scene type equals type. Right? I want to be able to say, okay, load this scene and just make sure that this scene is a game scene, right? So that when I come here and I reset the scene, of course this is gonna be always a game, because when I reset a scene, it's always because the player dies, right? So I can just make sure that at this point, it doesn't matter what the scene name is. What matters is that the scene type is equal to a game scene. If we are in a game scene, now we're cooking, right? If we are in a game scene, what I want to do is I want to be calling init, right? Now, this here has a little problem because all these things, I want to do them, almost all of them, regardless of whether or not the player is found in the scene, because in this, the first time it's not going to be found in the scene and it's going to be instantiated, but the second time we load the scene, so after we press play and we reload again, the player is going to be in the game, and I'm going to make sure of that by doing this. When I call change the scene, I also want to reparent the player to us, and I do this by having a reference to this player. So private game object, private game object and player. Now the player, of course, is gonna be this game object here, this gentleman here. Voila! Now what I can do is player.transform.parent equals this .transform. Boom! Now all of a sudden the player is the children of an object that doesn't get destroyed while loading a scene. And what we can do here is we can make sure that this is equal to null as soon as we instantiate this object, right? Just after we created it. This means that the player is now gonna be the child of the scene and not of the currently active scene and not of course of any other thing. What I want to do is, of course, this stuff I want it to be done here. So calculate spawning position goes here, and then if I don't find the player, I spawn it. But if I do find the player, this has already been set. This is all fine and dandy. I just need to move the player, right? So here I can just go vector 3.0, right? And in here, position and rotate player, and I go player.transform.position is actually gonna be the spawning position, which we calculated here, and the rotation transform.rotation is actually gonna be at this point in time quaternion.identity, but then we'll change it. Or actually, you know what, actually let's calculate it here. Quaternion spawning rotation equals that, okay, and then we set it here. At this point it's okay, we just do this. We create a player and then we position it and rotate it. That's good, because the death zone now is going to be resetting the scene. Reset scene changes to the scene using this script. This reparents the player to the persistent data objects and set up the scene type to be game specifically now. Then I just need to actually change the scene. So scene manager dot load scene. The scene manager is gonna load the new scene. On scene loaded, we make sure that we're in a game and we reinitialize things. The player doesn't get respawned, but it gets repositioned. Now, another thing that I want to do is zero out the momentum. So player.get component rigid body dot velocity equal vector 3.0, because we don't need the player to move around once it spawns. It needs to spawn completely still. Now let it compile, and then we bathe in the glory of the first time that you run the code and it never runs. I mean, it runs, but it's probably gonna be bugging out at some point, right? So if we now select the player, it's gonna be there, and we can get the Daydream controller up and running. Let's try and kill ourselves. Oh, and there we are, we're there. And everything is working actually. We can move around and we can die, and boom, we're there again. Kill and boom, we're there again. Now this is quite good, I'd say. We can play around with this platforming challenges, and I should have restored some of that. Boom, but this is quite nice. It works. There we go. Now, is there anything else that we want to do today? We have done a lot actually. I think I'll keep it at this, right? This is pretty good. We managed to rework the program flow to be compatible with what we're doing with Daydream. And I think this is a very, very important step that if done correctly, it's going to save you a lot of hassle later on down the line. Especially when we're going to be using fade in and fade out. It's just going to be nicer in general. But I like this. I like the fact that now the player dies and can be respawned immediately. Reloading the scene is done in a very clean way that we take care of. And we also have the death zone and a few platforming challenges. Now, something that's nice that we can do actually, because I would like to test this game on my Daydream device, is build this, right? So in build settings, we already have Android selected. We go into player settings, and actually let's set up that key store. Let's create a new key store. I'm gonna save it in documents, and I'm gonna be calling it Patreon key store, right? Let's give it a password. It's gonna be something I'm not gonna tell you. Then we're gonna create a new key for the key store. Alice is gonna be Gabe. Password, I'm gonna be using the same. Validity 50 years, that's fine. First and last name, it doesn't really matter. Organization unit, doesn't really matter. Organization is gonna be, well, me, but doesn't matter. Default company will do. Now it has to be something, so it's gonna be, well, for Gabe. And I'm gonna be creating this key. It can take a while. Good. Now we can go here, select our key, input our password, and we can build it. And if I release it, doesn't matter, debug, it doesn't matter. We just add our open scene and we build and run. It's gonna ask us, where do you want to build this? I usually build in the builds new folder, Patreon, and this is gonna be Patreon platformer. Pate plat. Sounds good. And build. Well, fine, yes, okay, right, there's another thing, of course, a bundle identifier. First of all, XR for Daydream, that's fine. Other settings here has to become .gabe.patplat. Oh, of course, this has to be for Nougat, because Daydream is only compatible with Nougat compatible devices and higher, and the rest should be quite fine. Post-processing installed with V2. I don't know why it's get included all the time, because I've tried the V2. It's nice. I've got no bad things to say about it, apart from the fact that it's not compatible with the new, you know, scripting pipelines that they implemented in 2018. So what's the point? I don't want to say bad things about it though. It's really nice. You could check it out. You should check it out. The rest is okay. I don't really care about all this other stuff. I don't really care about most of the things that are here, but yeah. Color space, I would like to have it linear, but yeah, it doesn't really work in linear color space usually. You have to go and do your own thing. Oh my god, okay. And even if I go through this, right, I can guarantee you that something is gonna come up and doesn't work. Let's see, let's see. It defaults to gamma anyways if it can't work like that. Oh, what have I done? So yeah, I'm just gonna build it, and if it does its thing, I'm just gonna say goodbye to everybody. I'm probably gonna make this video available on YouTube as well, and the previous one, so you can probably check it. And if you're watching this on YouTube, do have a look at my Patreon page, is in the link in the description. And that's pretty much it. Next time, what I want to do is I want to add a grappling hook. I think I've said it last time as well, but you know, I wanted to have some game first, you know, some objective, and here it is, you know, go until the end. There's nothing to now go into a windscreen. We're probably going to be adding this later on during development, because I really want to add a grappling hook. But yeah, apart from that, you know, I'll see you next time.